Hopefully you all heard that. We have our monthly meetings are something that we have done all through COVID and long before that. All of them were in person before. And now we're trying to make the shift back to do every other. So some in person, some virtual. And I've been here just a year, so about a year and a week. And part of what we did for my first year was really take a long look at the needs, where we can be of service and where we can fill some of those holes. And our outreach and education to older adults and their caregivers is something of importance to us, importance to me, of personal importance, but there's also a need to increase this education. And it's not that it's not being done, it's that we can help in that area. I was so happy to make the acquaintance of Alice and Dee Dee and later Sydney, because the work that they're doing with Northern Virginia RAFT is incredible. It's services that I wish I had up in Massachusetts with my grandma. And I was just kind of blown away by what they already offer, but also their approach to older adults and mental health, all kind of holistically and encompassing. And that was really important to us as we were looking for partners. I want to do this hopefully in two parts. This hopefully being the first, where we can talk about, we meaning not me, the experts, can talk about the signs and what to look for. And they're going to get into that in more detail. But then later get into some more specifics and down and dirty into it. And I hope that, to get your feedback so that we can build that out. We have amazing opportunities, and I know at the end, Dee Dee, don't worry, I will be putting up information about a great event that we're, as NAMI Northern Virginia, fortunate to be part of on May 31st. And so I'm going to put information and a link up to that. But now I'm going to stop talking, because I am not who you're here to listen to, and introduce our wonderful panel of people from Northern Virginia RAFT. Please, by the way, put questions into the chat, and there's also going to be some interaction in a bit.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I am Sydney Palinkas. I am the RAFT Education and Outreach Coordinator. We'll have my team introduce ourselves, then I'll get started.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Alice Straker, and I am the manager of the RAFT program. And it's great to see so many people here. Yes. We're really honored because we've been partners with NAMI for many, many years, and this is the first event that we've been able to do with NAMI. So we're very excited.
And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Dee Dee Uzawi here. I'm one of the mental health therapists with the RAFT program. Like Alice said, we've been partnered for a long time. So we're excited to get back post-COVID to do this kind of event. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You can all see that. I definitely want you all to be interactive tonight. So please be using that chat. So we're going to be talking about what is normal as we get older in relation to dementia and depression. And I'm going to kind of go back and forth between using the term normal and typical. Originally, we talked about this presentation as what's normal, but I recently was in another training and they were talking about typical as opposed to normal. Because I think there's a little bit of stigma when we say this isn't normal, right? But what we mean is what is typical in aging, right? As opposed to something that might be an issue that you want support for, right? like depression or dementia. So we're going to talk about what's typical as we get older, what's not so typical, what are the signs and symptoms of depression and dementia, how can we support someone, and then what are the resources. All right, so let's ooh, and if you are unmuted, we'll ask you to just mute yourself just so there's not that feedback. Thank you so much. All right, so let's start with Phyllis's story. So Phyllis is 79 years old. She lives alone and she sees her adult children and grandchildren often. She likes going for walks. She recently decided, though, to take a step back from being on the board of her civic association. While out for a walk one day, Phyllis decides to stop into the grocery store to pick up some things for dinner. However, when she gets home, she realizes she's forgotten things on her list. When Phyllis is talking to her oldest daughter, she accidentally calls her the younger daughter's name. She laughs, I mean Cindy, whichever daughter you are. Phyllis notices that she kept forgetting her passwords, so she decided to write them down in a notebook she keeps in her locked desk. Sometimes Phyllis feels sad about the friends that she's lost over the years. It's hard to be one of the only ones left in my friend group, she said. She likes to take days where she looks through her old photo albums and reminisces. Phyllis also thinks about her own death and has created an advanced care plan and talked to her children about what she would like for a funeral one day. So use the chat box. What do you think about Phyllis? Is this normal aging? Is Phyllis typical in her memory, in her mood? What do you think? Marcia says normal. Sounds typical. Anybody think not so typical? Yeah, sounds normal or typical to me.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Yep, same thing. Perfect. Thank you, Maria. Yeah, so from what we're seeing, Phyllis's situation looks pretty normal, right? She's got a couple of things here and there where she doesn't remember something, doesn't remember, the kid's name for a second. And all of that is really similar to just normal aging. And really, sometimes just normal living. I'm having a lot of that now in my 30s. I don't remember everything. So all of that is normal. And in her thinking about, kind of her own death, right? She's really kind of planning. She's not thinking about it in a way that's connected to necessarily depression, right? She's really trying to plan for her own death and make sure her family is taken care of. So what are some other experiences that you would say are normal as we get older? We're talking most tonight about what's not normal or not typical as we get older, but what are normal experiences for aging? Things that we can all expect to probably happen. Feel free to put it in the chat. What's something that you kind of know is going to happen as we get older? Yeah, forgetting names, being lonely. I don't know if that one's definitely going to happen though, Sandra. I think that's something we see a lot with aging, but not necessarily a definite aches and pains. Yeah, becoming more frail, right? Our bone density might go down as we get older. Walking into a room and forgetting where we're going. Yes, Joseph, that's definitely something I think we all experience. Being easily distracted. Yeah. All right, let's see what we have in my list here. All right, so grief and loss is something that almost all of us are going to experience. I don't know if anyone's going to get away in life without experiencing some type of grief and loss, right? And as we get older, we're going to see that more and more. Experiencing stress, right? And Shannon put in the chat, fear of not wanting to be dependent on other people. I think that's probably definitely a thing a lot of people experience. Right? Or friends and family getting sick, right? Again, going back to that grief and loss and maybe experiencing stress over that. Sometimes experiencing sadness or anger or fear or guilt, right? There's lots of emotions that come throughout our lives. Wondering what your purpose is. That's a great one, Susan. Thinking about and planning for the end of life, right? Thinking about advanced care planning, creating a will. And then we're all going to make poor decisions every once in a while, right? maybe occasionally missing a monthly payment or having a check bounce. Maybe forgetting what day it is and remembering a little bit later. I was out today and I was parallel parking and I saw a sign that said, don't park here if it's April 25th. And I had to think for a second, what day is it, right? I couldn't remember. Can I park here or can I not? Bob says getting tired earlier in the evening. That's definitely one a lot of us are going to experience as we get older. Forgetting the word for something or someone's name, but remembering it later. Ooh, I'm just going to pause for a second because it looks like someone is drawing on the screen. I'm not able to stop that as the host, but maybe Rebecca, maybe you're able to kind of turn that off for us. But yeah, forgetting someone's name and remembering it later is very common. I know like my grandma, she will go through everybody's name sometimes before she gets to mine, right? So I'm Jody, Julie, Meryl, Jovan, Sydney before we get to me. Losing things every once in a while, right? Losing our keys, our wallet, our cell phone, all of that can be pretty common. Or not necessarily remembering if you took your medication. Has anybody had that where you take your pill and then 2 seconds later you think, well, I know I opened it. Pretty sure I had a sip of water, but did I actually take it, right? Sometimes that can be hard. Or locking the door. I have that a lot when I go on vacation. Did I lock the door? Did I not lock the door? Maybe I should just go back and check. Right, Bob says definitely now I write it down. That's a good way to remember. We're just taking longer to process things. Somebody says something that just takes us a couple more minutes longer than maybe it used to for us to process what was said. So all of that are normal parts of getting older. But what's not normal? Depression. So depression is, contrary to popular belief, sometimes not a normal part of getting older. It's also not a moral flaw or a weakness. It's actually a medical condition that can really interfere with our normal functioning. So depression statistics for looking at older adults, right? Older adults are at an increased risk. And as we go through the risk factors, you'll see some of the reasons that that's the case. So depression is actually more common in older adults with chronic health conditions, but it's the majority of older adults are not experiencing depression, right? Even though they're at increased risk, it's still not the majority of older adults. So it is not something that should be expected as we get older. Only an estimated 1 to 5 older adults experience depression. That rises to 13.5 when we talk about those that need home health care and hospitalization. Now, those are high rates, but it's also something manageable and treatable, right? We never want to think that this is just an expected part of getting older. So these are some of the common risk factors for depression. And again, you'll see some of these are things that we see more often as we get older, like loneliness and isolation, not being able to get out as often, which often correlates with that loss of mobility, right? Not being able to move around as much, not being able to drive can increase that isolation and loneliness. That loss of independence can definitely increase our risk for depression. Grief and loss, no matter what that loss is, it could be the loss of a spouse, it could be the loss of a pet, the loss of a career. Somebody mentioned earlier, wondering what your purpose in life is. So maybe that loss can come when you retire and you realize, ooh, that was really the big thing in my life. Now what do I have? And now what is my purpose here? And that can be hard for people. Experiencing chronic illness or pain can definitely increase our risk for depression, as well as having a family history of depression. So older adults are often overlooked and underdiagnosed for depression. Why do you think that is? Why do you think depression is underdiagnosed in older adults? Put it in the chat for me. Anybody have any ideas why depression might be underdiagnosed in older adults? I'm sorry, I'm not able to get that red mark off the screen. because people think it's normal. Yeah. Underdiagnosed perhaps because it's thought to be normal. Yeah. Or because people are good at faking it and appearing okay. Yeah, that's a really good example, Joseph, for good reason. Yeah, I used to previous to my work with RAFT, was working in the elder abuse field, and elder abuse is one of the signs, or depression is one of the signs of elder abuse, excuse me. And people would say, well, how can we know? Because all older adults are depressed, right? It's one of the reasons it's being misdiagnosed. We assume just looking sad and being alone is what older people do. Thank you for sharing that, Bob. And one, that's not what all older people do. And it's also not the only thing that depression can look like. Yeah, we have poor expectations of later life. A lot of this can come down to ageism and what we think being older actually looks like. So you all hit the kind of nail on the head here. This can be one, because sadness is not really always the main symptom, not the main way that older adults are expressing the depression that they're experiencing. And then we have a lot of stigma around mental health, right? Folks might not want to share how they're feeling or talk about depression, or even, say that they're experiencing depression. And then you all had a lot of other really great examples. So I'm glad we got those shared. So some other symptoms of depression besides sadness, besides this kind of Eeyore image, which I think is a lot of what we have, we see feelings of hopelessness, pessimism, maybe feelings of guilt, feeling like you're worthless or helpless, a lot of irritability, right? So people might start getting a lot grouchier, a little cranky when they're depressed. Restlessness, anxiety can come with depression. Not being so interested in activities or hobbies that they used to do. Maybe not going out as much, just not finding that joy from the things that they used to find joy from. People generally are very tired. Depression can look like just getting up and brushing your teeth feels like a mountain of an activity to do for the day. So we might see a little bit of self-neglect for folks that are experiencing depression. They're not taking care of their hygiene as often. Maybe difficulty concentrating, remembering details, or making decisions, or even just getting through a task, right? Going through your bills can seem like too much. Sleep is very often affected with mental health. People might be sleeping all the time, all through the day, or insomnia, right? They can't sleep. They're waking up all the time. Eating is also affected. I always joke that people are generally on one end of the spectrum with eating in terms of stress. People are either going to eat everything in the whole cabinet when they're stressed, or eat nothing. Not everyone falls on one of those, but a lot of us do. You probably see yourself in there a little bit. I know when I'm stressed, I don't want to eat anything. So those big appetite changes can be a symptom. Of course, thoughts of suicide, talking about self-harm, and then also physical issues. So some people might not really be comfortable talking about feeling hopeless or feeling worthless or the guilt that they're experiencing, those more mental health symptoms. They're more comfortable talking about the physical symptoms that come with this. So you might hear people talking more about aches and pains, headaches, cramps, stomach issues. And that's their way of kind of describing what's happening to them. So older adults and suicide. Unfortunately, we see older adults are disproportionately affected by suicide, and this is tied directly to depression. So older adults make up 12% of the population, but make up approximately 18% of suicides in the United States. Older adults tend to plan suicide more carefully compared to younger folks, and actually use more lethal methods than younger adults. So for those that attempt suicide, 1 in 4 older adults will die by suicide, compared to 1 in 200 youths for those that attempt to those that will actually die by suicide. And for the older adults that don't die by suicide but do attempt it, they're less likely to recover after. They're more likely to have long-term effects. And men 65 and older really face the highest overall rate of suicide. So it's so, so important that you all are here talking about this issue. We want to make sure we're taking disclosures like this seriously and really listening to people. So seeking support for depression. Your primary care doctor is always a great place to start. And if you have a friend or a loved one who is experiencing depression, but maybe it's a little bit nervous to talk to somebody about it, right? Going to a mental health professional sounds scary to them. Going to their primary care doctor first might seem a little bit less stigmatizing. We want to destigmatize mental health in general, but I think going to your physical care doctor or your primary care doctor can feel a little bit easier for people. Of course, talking to a mental health clinician, faith communities can be a great resource for folks experiencing depression. I've seen awesome work from yoga, music, and art therapy for folks with mental health challenges, especially for people that might have more advanced dementia or other cognitive impairments where traditional talk therapy or psychotherapy can't be as effective. And then support groups, of course. All right, so let's get interactive again. Have a case example here. So we have Frank. Frank is 81 years old and he's a retired Marine. Since his wife Jean passed away, he's lived alone in their home. His children live locally and visit when they can. A few months after Jean's passing, a friend invited Frank to go to the local senior club. No, Jean and I don't do that type of thing, says Frank. I'd rather do something useful with my time. Since Frank is no longer a full-time caregiver for Jean, his days are mostly empty. It's been a year now since Jean passed away, and Frank is having trouble moving on. Frank tells his doctor that he has very low energy and his appetite has changed. His doctor says this is normal for getting older, but he can come back in if things get worse. After a visit, his children discuss whether Frank might be struggling with depression. It makes sense that he'd be depressed. He's all alone. He has nothing going on. His family decides to just wait it out. Frank tells a close friend about how much he misses his wife. He wants to be with her and that he thinks about it all the time. His friend says, "You need to pull yourself together. Jean wouldn't want to see you like this." Frank's family and friends notice that he's become irritable and grouchy, and they stop visiting him or inviting him out as often. All right. So what do we think about Frank? What are some of the signs that Frank might need support? Feel free to put it in the chat. He's turning down offers to connect. So he's withdrawing, irritable and grouchy. He doesn't want help. So he's isolating things, like isolating himself. He misses his wife. Oh, Shannon, that's a really great point. So Shannon said Frank's alone and thinking about being with his wife. He's a Marine. He might have firearms, right? So if we're thinking about Frank's risk, that makes him a little bit more at risk that if he might have guns in the home. All right. So why do you think Frank turned down the offer to go to the senior club? Let's think about what Frank's life was like before. Why do you think he didn't want to go to the senior club? He doesn't know how to socialize alone. He's not able to imagine being without Jean. He wants to be with his wife before. It's out of his comfort zone. Yeah, all of those are great points. It seems frivolous compared to being with his wife. That's a really good point, Linda. And let's think about Frank, right? He was a Marine before, right? He's probably a pretty strong guy. He's the main caregiver for his wife. Senior club, that sounds like it's for old people, right? That's probably what Frank's thinking. He says, I want to do something useful with my time. So if you were Frank's friend, what's something you could invite Frank to maybe get out of the house that he might say yes to? Fishing, yeah. Joseph makes a great point. He has a double loss, the loss of his wife, but also the loss of his purpose. This has been the main thing that he's been doing for, we don't know how long Jean needed care, but Frank was caring for her for probably quite a while. So inviting him to volunteer, inviting him to do something that's maybe active, like fishing, like Christy said, or something where he's able to be useful, right? He's used to being useful. What do you think about Frank's friend telling him you need to pull yourself together? Frank, your wife wouldn't want to see you like this. And some other great examples in the chat of what you could do with him. Marcia says, not helpful, not very empathetic. He'll tune that person out. Yeah, and this is something we see a lot. I don't know if you all have seen this, but I certainly have. Let me just give him some tough love. You just pull yourself out of it, making him feel guilty for his feelings. Exactly. Your wife wouldn't want to see you like this. That's not really going to help at all. It's just going to make him alienated from his friend. What are some things that we could say to Frank to support him if he said this to you? He said, I'm missing my wife. A grief support group might be able to help him. Ask him how you can help. This is great. I don't think you guys need this training that I'm giving. Yeah, Susan, that's great. Just validating how he's feeling, right? You sound sad. Opening it up for him to talk even more. I like that, Bob. I'm coming over. I'm concerned about you. Right? And maybe talking to some of your other friends about why Frank is becoming irritable and grouchy. He didn't just suddenly have a personality change. He's going through something, and this could be definite signs of depression. So we talked a lot about Frank's kind of informal social support. What do you think about his doctor? The doctor saying, look, this is just a normal part of getting older. Come on back if things get worse. Ageism, absolutely. Needs education. Yeah, Frank's doctor should be seeing some of those signs that Frank is experiencing depression or he's struggling. I like that, Shannon. Shannon says, I would suggest volunteer options and see if Frank has any interest in any of them. Yeah, because it sounds like Frank was pretty active before Jean passed away. He probably had a lot going on. And for any of you that are caregivers, you probably know caregiving is a full-time job. It's a lot of work, and to suddenly lose that completely would be a pretty big hole, as someone brought up before. All right, so those were all great ideas, and we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and thinking about caregiving. Yes, being a caregiver is a full-time job. Thanks, Joseph. To talk about dementia. Now we're going to bring this all together in the end because you're probably thinking, why did we spend all that time talking about depression and now we're talking about dementia? Are they even related? Yes, they are. We will bring them together at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's talk about memory changes as we get older. What's typical, what's not typical, and what might be dementia. So dementia, just like depression, is not a normal part of getting older. Memory loss that interferes with your daily life is not a normal part of the aging process. So dementia is actually the umbrella term for all of the different diseases that affect our brain in this way. So Alzheimer's disease is one of the most common forms of dementia. About 70% of all dementias. We also see vascular dementia, which is often caused by strokes. There's also Lewy body dementia, dementia from Parkinson's disease, frontal temporal lobe dementia. There's many, many, many different types of dementia. And dementia, again, is this overarching term. Just like soda could be the umbrella term for then Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Mountain Dew and 7-Up, all the other different sodas, right? So dementia is this overarching term. All right, so let's look at these differences between normal aging and signs of potential dementia. Normal aging, forgetting someone's name for a second. I would bet a lot of money that everyone on this call has had a second where we see someone and we forget for a second what that person's name is. But what about if you met up with someone who you've known for a while, and even after they tell you their name, you're still not able to place them? That might be a sign that something's going on. Normal aging might be forgetting where you put your wallet, or forgetting if you took your medication like we talked about before. A sign of dementia might be forgetting something very significant that happened. So forgetting that you got into a car accident yesterday, or forgetting that trip you took last week. Something pretty big. Normal aging, forgetting why you went into a specific room. I'm sure everybody on this call has had a time where you walk into the kitchen and you forget why you're there. I know I will talk to my mom on the phone. She lives in New York, and she'll say, "Why did I walk into the kitchen?" I don't know, right? But that's something we all experience. A sign of dementia might be getting lost in a place that's actually familiar to us, out in your community, and suddenly you don't know how to get home. Or you're in the supermarket and you don't know where you are at all. Normal aging might be making a mistake here and there on your checkbook. Sign of dementia might be being really unable to manage your finances, or making financial decisions that are very, very unsound, making decisions that you would never normally make in your normal previous life. Normal aging might be not remembering how to use a new electronic device. I had to get an iPhone for this job, and I feel like I'm still figuring out how to use it. It took me like 2 months to figure out how to put it on silent when I was in a meeting. But a sign of dementia might be if after this meeting I go into the bathroom and I don't remember what to do in there, or I don't remember how to brush my teeth, or what I'm supposed to do with the toothpaste. Normal aging might be forgetting the word for something every once in a while. You know, I got to do that, the thing. You know what I'm talking about, the thing, right? But sign of dementia might be consistent difficulty completing sentences, or even holding a conversation with someone. It's not just a word here and there. It's very, consistent. Normal aging, feeling irritable or stressed when our routine is changed. And a sign of dementia might be experiencing paranoia or increased suspiciousness, or even delusions or hallucinations. So hopefully that helps a little bit in distinguishing the difference between normal aging and when something might be dementia. So dementia is also much more than just memory loss. That's often the biggest thing people think of when we say dementia, right? If I say, "What's dementia?" you say Alzheimer's and you say memory loss. As we saw, it's much more than just Alzheimer's, and it's also much more than just memory loss. So we're going to go through a little bit of what that can look like. So changes in memory, often our most recent memories are lost first. So if you've ever met someone with dementia, you might notice that they don't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, but for some reason they're able to tell you, where they went to school and where they grew up and all this stuff about them from 40 years ago. And that can seem kind of odd for us. Now, all people with dementia experience things differently, but oftentimes we're losing those most recent memories first and kind of going down this bookshelf of memories. So this last shelf, the bottom shelf, those first memories that we ever formed are often lost last. In the beginning stages, it might be more general forgetfulness, losing items more often, leaving things on the stove, forgetting you're cooking. As it progresses, it might be not even remembering close family members, not recognizing your own image in the mirror, not remembering where you live or how old you are, and really losing track of the date or the time or the place that you're in. We also see a lot of changes in language and communication. Talked to before already about finding those right words. You also see people maybe substituting words. So not saying pen, but I'm gonna use this. I can't even think of another word right now. Right? I'm having difficulty finding words, but replacing common words when they can't think of the correct word. You might see people repeating themselves often. People might have very disorganized speech that doesn't really make any sense when you're talking to them. And they might not know that what they're saying doesn't make a lot of sense to you, which can be really frustrating if then you're asking them, what do you mean? What'd you say? Right? Because they think they're making perfect sense. If someone learned English later in life, they're very likely to revert back to that first language or that birth language as the dementia progresses. They're more likely to take longer to process what was said. Now, people kind of differ on how long they think this amount of time is, but we see often 20 seconds. People with dementia are going to need at least 20 seconds to process what you said. Let's take a second here and just wait 20 seconds. That was a long time, right? That felt like a very long time for us. So when you ask someone a question, if they don't answer right away, it might just be because they're processing. So we don't want to just jump in and ask again. People also might rely more on visual cues or hand gestures compared to verbal language. So as they're less able to comprehend that verbal language, the physical cues can be helpful. So if you're talking to someone and saying, are you cold? Do you want to go inside? That might not ring any bells, but if we say, are you cold? Why don't we go inside? Right, that verbal language can help. Or I'm sorry, the hand gestures can help. People might start talking less as they have this difficulty finding the right words. As it takes longer to process what was said, they might stop communicating as often. But with all these different changes to our language, the side of our brain that does rhythm is often retained. So many of you have probably seen some of those cool videos online of people who have more advanced dementia. They listen to music and suddenly they're moving or they're singing, they're dancing. And that is because music is really retained in our brain. The side of our brain that handles rhythm is most often retained with dementia. But along with music, we also retain the ability for chit chat or that general flow of conversation. So if you've ever, talked to someone with dementia and at first it's, hey, how are you? Good. How are you? Oh, the weather's been beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Great to see you. And you don't realize anything is wrong at first. And then suddenly you're in a loop of the same story over and over, or maybe they start saying things that don't quite make sense. That first initial little chit chat, that first flow of the conversation was nice and easy, and they were able to do that. And that's because they retained that rhythm. We also see changes in judgment and problem solving. So people, as we talked about already, might have difficulty managing their finances or doing more complicated tasks that require critical thinking. They might not be able to assess for safety and risk anymore. The things that, now we say, oh, I wouldn't do that, right? I wouldn't jump in the car with a stranger or give my money to this person over the phone. That little alarm bell in their brain isn't going off quite the same way that it used to. They're also not able to retrace their steps. So when they lose that wallet or they end up on a street that they don't recognize, they're not able to retrace their way back. People have more trouble with self-care tasks or housework or cleaning, which comes down to the problem solving. Those things can be harder to do, and with judgment, right? What's the point? Why do I need to shower every single day? That judgment might be a little bit off. And people might lose impulse control, which is when we see people saying things that suddenly aren't quite so nice, right? Pointing out people gaining a lot of weight or, maybe using curse words or slurs when they never used those types of words before. We also see, which is often a lot less talked about with dementia, changes in our spatial and visual abilities. So our vision will slowly diminish, and someone with more advanced dementia might actually only have kind of a binocular vision. So they're not able to see a lot of what is around them. So if you come up to someone from the side, they might not even realize that you're there when you're coming up to them until you're actually touching them. People often lose depth perception and a lot of spatial awareness. They might not be able to tell the depth of things. So you might wonder, why do I have this picture here? This picture of this dog and the rug. Does anybody know why I chose this photo? It's not just because I really like the winter and I'm missing it with the heat. So the reason I see the questions in here, and I'll definitely get to them at the end. The reason I have this photo is because for some people, when they lose that depth perception, dark rugs like this or dark things can actually just look like a hole, right? They're not able to tell that this is actually a rug. People might avoid going this way because they think they don't want to walk through this hole. So things that are really kind of just benign objects can start to seem scary or frightening when people lose this depth perception. Yeah, the dog is kind of waiting. The dog's just kind of a nice little extra thing in that photo there. We also see changes in emotions and behaviors. So people are more likely to get overwhelmed. They might have a lot of mood swings from crying to agitation, might be more irritable. They might have disinterest in activities and really withdraw. Some people also experience paranoia, hallucinations, or suspiciousness. People have issues with sleep, not being able to sleep at night, sleeping all day, having night terrors. But one really important thing to point out with dementia is even very, very advanced dementia, people are often able to still experience a very broad range of emotions and recognize them. So they might not know who you are, coming to visit them, or what you guys talked about, but they'll likely pick up on how you made them feel and how you are feeling with them, right? Did you come there feeling agitated and you left them feeling stressed? Or did you come calm and happy and you left them feeling calm and happy? We also see changes in motor skills. So people have difficulty with fine motor skills, such as buttoning shirts, gross motor skills, getting in and out of bed, which requires often more assistance with activities of daily living, like showering, eating, dressing. And this can often lead to issues with gait. So walking, people might be more stooped. You might see some shuffling. So getting a dementia diagnosis can be scary if someone thinks that this might be what's going on with them or a loved one. So scheduling a visit with your healthcare provider is really important, with your primary care doctor, with a neurologist, or with a geriatrician. You could contact a local memory assessment center in the area, and there's a couple at some of the big universities around here. But you also want to rule out other things that have similar symptoms to dementia, such as a urinary tract infection or depression, which we'll talk about more, how those overlap a little bit in some of those symptoms. All right, so why are we talking about these two different things? What do they have to do with each other? So both depression and dementia are not normal parts of aging, even though they often are seen that way. They also have similar early signs. So oftentimes people are misdiagnosed with one or the other, right? They go to the doctor says, I think you're just depressed. Now, the doctor shouldn't say just depressed, right? But the doctor will diagnose them with depression when really what's happening is dementia, and vice versa. But we also know there's a strong connection between the two conditions. So individuals living with dementia are at a greater risk for depression. And individuals with late life depression are also at an increased risk for dementia. So it's important to talk about both of these together. So these are just some of the early signs of both dementia and depression. So a lack of interest in hobbies or activities, withdrawing from activities or loved ones, difficulty making decisions, difficulty concentrating, difficulty remembering things, changes in sleep, right? Sleeping too much, having trouble sleeping, restlessness, irritability, agitation, and not engaging in self-care, like bathing, dressing, not going to the doctor, not taking your medications. And people have brought up ageism a couple times, and I think that definitely plays into which one of these they think it is. Maybe if someone is younger and they start suddenly displaying all these symptoms, we might think she's depressed. I think that's what's going on. If someone's a lot older, we might automatically think, well, they've got dementia, and we don't look further. So we want to make sure we're understanding that these are very similar in the way they present sometimes early on, but they are two different diseases. So how can we support someone that we are concerned about with whatever they're facing? One, offer that emotional support. You all were awesome in the chat talking about reflective listening, active listening. Sometimes it's not about you giving advice or you talking, it's just you listening, you just being there. You know, with dementia in particular, people often talk about how their friends or their loved ones kind of leave when they get this diagnosis. Their friends don't know how to be their friends in the same way anymore, and they get a little spooked and aren't part of their lives anymore. So continuing that connection, helping to get them connected and stay connected to different services and social connections, all the great resources that you all talked about already. Being non-judgmental when they talk to you about how they're feeling or what's going on with them. Not criticizing their feelings. Like with Frank, when his friend said, pull yourself together, Jean wouldn't want to see you like this. You all were right on, right? That was not very empathetic. We never want to criticize how someone's feeling. Frank might not have told anybody else he was feeling that way, and he might not tell anybody else after that response. We want to point out hope, especially if someone gets a diagnosis like dementia. It can feel really hopeless. What does this mean for my life? What does this mean for me? I think the person I was before is gone. It can feel very, very difficult for people, which is why often dementia can be connected to depression, but there is still a lot of hope. People with depression with dementia can live really full, meaningful lives, and pointing out that hope to them is really important. So I get you all being interactive again, get ready for the chat. I know you coming to the NAMI meetings probably are pretty familiar talking about mental health. So what are some of the unhelpful ways you have heard people talk about depression, describe depression, talk to someone who's experiencing depression? Give me some examples of those unhelpful things in the chat. Nobody has any unhelpful things. It's only been awesome, helpful language. You have nothing to be depressed about. Get over it. Pull yourself together. Snap out of it. Oh yeah, your mood is inconvenient. You control your happiness. Yeah, people think that it's just kind of a snap, right? It's just in your head. Talking about therapy like it's very stigmatizing. I don't need therapy. I'm not a crazy person. You have so many things to be happy about, though. Why would you be depressed? Just cheer up. Let's talk about something else. That's a really good one, Marsha. What's wrong with you? You don't look depressed, or you need to be stronger. All right, so let's reframe these. What are some examples of supportive, helpful language around depression? What are the things that we want to hear from others and the things that we should be saying to others? Not just to someone living with depression, but how should we be talking about it as a society? Yeah, I'm here for you. What else? What is supportive language? How are you feeling? Then actually listen. You aren't to blame for this. I like that, Maria. Right? Kind of flipping around. You're not controlling these feelings. You can't control just making it all go away in this second. All right, let's see what some of my examples are. I'm sorry you feel that way. Ask, how can I support you? Letting them know their feelings are valid. Talking about how depression is a medical condition. Saying, I'm concerned about you. What can I do to help? I'm really sorry you're experiencing this. How can I support you? I think one of you already said almost those exact words. Carol's, that's great, Carol. Maybe you personally aren't the person to take all this on for somebody else. So let's talk to a professional. Let's get you connected to someone who really understands this. I'm here for you. Or I've been in therapy. It's really helped me. I've talked to someone before. You're not alone. Yeah. All right. So what about dementia? What are some of the ways that we talk about dementia to someone with dementia or about someone with dementia or dementia in general that is not helpful? Some of that language you hear about dementia. She's just crazy. What's wrong with you? Correcting their perceptions. What else? You're not making any sense. I just told you that. You're repeating the same thing. Yeah, we're almost getting mad at them for what they're experiencing. It's like they're not even there. Bob, that is so true and breaks my heart every time I see it when people talk about people like they're not even there. So I think Grandpa has some screws loose. Heard that? Or I think they're losing it. It doesn't matter. She won't remember anyway. Alzheimer's disease. I think I'm just having a senior moment. Again, bring that idea that dementia is normal for aging, right? It's just a senior moment. You don't remember? You must be getting old. And Grandma, it's me. Don't you remember me? Even though we know Grandma has some trouble remembering things. And now I'm going to be quizzing her, making her feel bad. So what are some ways that we can change that language around dementia? What's supportive language around dementia? Let me help you. Take your time. I have that exact thing written on my slide. Thank you, Maria. Take your time. Talked about how long sometimes it can take people to process things, and rushing them can really fluster people even more. So take your time is an awesome one. We need that more in our lives. It could be just talking about how depression is not a normal part of getting older. When we hear some of those other statements saying, hey, actually, this isn't really a senior moment. Dementia is actually not normal for getting older. It's not normal for all seniors. Take your time. Maria already stole that one from me. Or not, we don't have to quiz people when we talk to them. If we know they're already having some trouble, we can just remind them right off the bat who we are. Right? As opposed to calling on the phone and saying, hey, it's me. Do you know who this is? Do you? Don't you recognize my voice? Don't you? Say, hey, Grandma, it's me. It's your granddaughter, Sydney. Remembering that feelings are intact and be kind. Absolutely, Joseph. Remembering that people with dementia can still live meaningful, rich lives. And when people start to do things and act in ways that are a little different than who they used to be, and sometimes people do say things that are hurtful, and it can be really hard for their family, remembering that's the dementia, right? It's not dad saying those things to me. All right, so let's switch gears and do another one of our case examples here. So we have Mary. Mary is 75 years old. She lives alone. Before retiring, she worked in the federal government. She loved crossword puzzles and reading and talking about current events. Mary always took pride in her appearance, rarely dressing down even after she retired. Lately, you've noticed that Mary doesn't like to talk on the phone or go out with family or friends as often. When you come by to visit, you notice a lot of unfinished crossword puzzles and unopened mail on her table. Mary's shirt is buttoned wrong, and you notice a stain on it. When talking with Mary, you mention the upcoming election, but Mary gets confused about who the current president is. I don't think I'll be voting for Bush again. I think we need a Democrat in the office now. When you correct her, she gets very defensive. Of course I know that. What did you come over here for anyway? I'm very busy. You can't just stop by whenever you want. So what are some signs that Mary might be needing some more support? If you are Mary's friend or her daughter or her husband, Mary lives alone, so I'm not sure why she lives alone if you're her husband, but whoever you are in Mary's life, what are some signs that she might need some more support? Difficulty dressing herself, having trouble with activities of daily living, not remembering the president, that's a pretty big one. Loss of self-care habits. And it's so important to know who the person was before. Mary rarely dressed down even after she retired. So the fact that she's got stains on her shirt, those are big red flags for us now. For other people, my stepdad, I don't think I've ever seen him without a stain on his shirt. He's just a guy with a lot of stains. So that wouldn't really be a red flag for me. But for Mary, who's always really taking pride in her appearance, that is a big red flag. Mail unopened. Yeah, for sure. So we know that Mary might need some help. How, especially knowing that she's a little defensive, how might you talk to Mary about the fact that you're worried about her? What might you say to Mary to let her know that you're concerned? Do you need help with things? Yeah, offering tangible support. You don't seem like yourself. Is there anything you want to talk about? Yeah, and what I like about those, have you thought about getting regular help? Yeah, none of those are coming out and saying, I think you have dementia, Mary, which maybe is what you're thinking, But that's a really scary thing and a really hard thing to say to somebody, and probably Mary's not gonna want to hear that. So talking more about, do you need some help and how are you feeling and what can I do to support you are all great ways to start that conversation. And Mary might say, yeah, you know what? I don't feel like myself. I haven't felt like myself lately. I have been having trouble with things. And that might open the door to more of a conversation. All right, let's talk about Miguel. So Miguel is 80 years old. He's originally from the Dominican Republic. Miguel has been in the US for over 25 years. He was never married, but has siblings back home that he stays in touch with. Miguel used to go every day to his local senior center. He played pickleball, took classes, and played dominoes. Last year, Miguel started experiencing some health challenges and had a very bad fall. He was in a rehab facility for several months, and he's now back home. He's been in physical therapy, but hasn't wanted to go back to the senior center. You offer to take Miguel to his next physical therapy appointment, but he says he doesn't really feel like going anymore. When you visit Miguel, he's only interested in watching television. He tells you that he's very tired and has been sleeping most of the time. You notice that it looks like he hasn't been showering or keeping his apartment clean. He says that he's just been too tired. Miguel talks about missing his family back in the DR. He hasn't been able to visit them in several years. I should be going to see them. I didn't see my parents enough before they passed. I wasn't a good son. They missed me, but I was too busy to visit. I wasted the time that I had with them. So what are some signs that Miguel might need some support? Depression. Yeah, Carol's going right to it. Bob says he's isolating himself. He's fixated on regrets and he's feeling guilty. He misses his parents, loss of interest in hobbies. Yeah, he was really active before that fall. He joins the national craze of pickleball. He's missing his appointments, neglecting his medical care. Anything else that might make you concerned about Miguel? He's also sleeping a lot, and he's sleeping so much and feeling so tired that he doesn't even feel like showering. I wonder if he hit his head when he fell. That's a good point, Shannon. That fall might have been part of the issue. He's feeling guilty. He lost his purpose and he's ruminating in the past. So how might you talk to Miguel about your concerns? Just like we talked to Mary, how would you talk to Miguel? How might you bring this up? Miguel seems like he might not be as defensive as Mary is when we talk to him. So what are some ways? Yeah, Marcia says you've had a setback. It's difficult to get back in the groove. So kind of just validating what Miguel just went through. I notice you're not doing what you've done before. Again, you guys are all awesome with this validating and reflective listening already. Miguel, I'm your friend and I'm concerned about you because you do not seem to be yourself. Bob says, get over it, Miguel. I'm concerned, or let's go to the senior center, right? Let's get him back into what he was doing back and connected to the people around him. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard not to have family nearby when you're down and out. Yeah, validating how difficult that might be, that now that he's having health issues, how hard it must be to be so far from his family. So in addition to you all as awesome support systems for the people in your lives, there's also a lot of great resources in the community. And I'm going to tell you all about RAFT. But before that, these are some other resources for you all to just be aware of. Dementia Capable Virginia is a really great resource online, gives you a lot of information about living with dementia in the state of Virginia. The Jewish Council for the Aging has ride shares. They have support groups. Nova Veterans is an awesome group if you or the person you're referring is a veteran. Senior Navigator can list a lot of resources for you. A Nova Medical House Calls program is awesome for getting a primary care doctor right in the home. And their only qualification for being labeled homebound is that you're not able to drive anymore. So they're very flexible in that way. Alzheimer's Association, Parkinson's Foundation, all also great resources. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about the RAFT program. So RAFT is the Regional Older Adults Facility Mental Health Support Team, quite a mouthful. But we are a program in Northern Virginia. We have both our clinical program and our dementia support program. And our overarching goal is really preventing older adults from ending up hospitalized in state psychiatric hospitals. We're noticing that about 57% of older adults hospitalized in Virginia in a state psychiatric hospital have actually a diagnosis of dementia as opposed to serious mental illness. And folks are staying an average length of stay of 229 days, which is 3.5 times longer than other residents. And these hospitals really are an appropriate place for someone living with dementia. And that can also limit the number of communities that will accept them upon being released from those hospitals. So our program is serving all of Northern Virginia. We're working to build a Northern Virginia Dementia Stakeholders Group, and we have a really great comprehensive resource list for families. So our clinical program, which has started 14 years ago, is really supporting older adults coming out of those state psychiatric hospitals and bringing them into nursing homes and assisted living, providing lots of support for those folks with serious mental illness and dementia with challenging behaviors. And they're awesome team, 98% success rate in preventing rehospitalization at state psychiatric hospitals. And Dee Dee is one of the 4 mental health therapists on that team. We also have a psychiatric nurse, a part-time psychiatrist, and a part-time admin assistant. And then in January, we launched our RAFT Dementia Support Program. So this is a short-term program. It's free. It's supporting individuals living with dementia and their families out in the community. It's providing education and support to families, helping to build up that caregiver resilience and reduce their stress. So that team is myself, 3 dementia specialists, and our data management specialist. So what do our services actually look like? Our specialists are working directly with the families in their homes, helping to assess what are their individual needs, right? What are those challenging behaviors? What's making that family or caregiver think, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can really care for my loved one anymore at home. And really providing individualized education and training to help them better understand the disease, connect them to non-pharmacological interventions like painting. We have one of our specialists who is helping somebody get back connected to her old love of painting that she kind of fell off of after the dementia and Parkinson's diagnosis. Connecting people to resources and services and helping to plan to prevent these crises from happening. So this is a case example. All of our cases are very, very different, but this is just an example of what one could look like. We have Jim. He's the sole caregiver for his wife, Patty, who's living with moderate dementia. Jim struggles to get Patty to take her medications each day. Patty used to love to cook and continues to try to do so. However, she often forgets that the stove is on and has become a safety hazard. Sometimes Patty becomes very agitated. She forgets who Jim is and will hit him when he comes close. Jim is losing his patience and doesn't know what to do. So our team would work with Jim and Patty, help identify what are some of those big needs, what are some of the triggers for some of the challenges, right? Right before Patty hits Jim, what's happening? What happens before that? What happens earlier in the day? And what does Jim do? And how can we help support both of them? teaching them new strategies, providing education to both of them and maybe other family members as well about dementia, and connecting them to resources. Some additional case examples, because again, every single case is very different. We've seen folks struggling with hoarding related to dementia, lots of irritability and agitation, people who start to have more verbal aggression, yelling at family members, cursing, saying hurtful, mean things, or sometimes people start to get physically aggressive, pushing, shoving, spitting. People who have issues with sleep, or people who are shadowing or following their caregiver around and being very upset when that caregiver leaves. All things that are presenting as challenging to the family and to the caregiver, but we can help them better understand that behavior, to better understand the person and take care of themselves as a caregiver. This is our eligibility. So resident of one of the 5 counties of Northern Virginia, 65 years or older. Starting in July, that number will go down to 55. A diagnosis of dementia or exhibiting symptoms of dementia. And we'll be able to help them get that diagnosis while we're working with them and living in the community. And anyone can make a referral. So we have an online form, or you can contact me directly and we can go through that form on the phone and get all that info. So I never want this online form to be the barrier for anybody in getting services. And we also offer trainings, free trainings on mental health, dementia, challenging behaviors to community groups, organizations, and professionals. All right, that was a big whole mouthful of me for an hour and a half. So I'm gonna stop my share and see if you have any questions for me and my team.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, that was so much really helpful information. A lot of which it made me think in a different way. And I don't know about everybody else. I see some familiar faces on here, and it was helpful for me to think about older adults and dementia in a different light than I have before. So I really appreciate the thoroughness of that. I want to bring up 2 questions that were in the chat a little bit earlier. One was, can dementia show up differently in people who are neurodivergent? For example, I believe we have multiple generations of twice exceptional family members with a mix of giftedness and ADHD. My father used to be charismatic and humorous and is now very literal and does not understand jokes.
That's a great question. Dee Dee or Alice, do you all want to take that one?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, Rebecca. And, the thing about dementia is that when you meet one person with dementia, you have met one person with dementia. And so everybody's experience of the cognitive decline is very different from one person to the next. And so it could very well be something related to some kind of cognitive decline. And we would absolutely recommend seeing some kind of a medical professional, possibly a neurologist, for more information about that. What caused the change? Why this? Why now?
And
Go ahead, Dee Dee.
no, I was gonna say that everybody's experience varies also. So getting that testing done early. Yeah, that you mentioned ADHD, that's one of them, or even like dyslexia or one of those. I remember when we were watching one of the videos, that's one thing the doctor says, people that already have those diagnoses. Yeah, it's always good to go back and get that, whether it's aphasia, dyslexia, or one of those, yeah, neurodivergent stuff. Yeah.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Sarah. I like to get some help about this dementia. My husband is 84 and I'm 74. He has a little bit of dementia, but I don't want to get that bad because he was on medication for dementia, but we are not giving because that's making him more sleepy. He's agitated and all. So I just need a little help of where should I turn to?
Well, I'll let see if my team has any suggestions, but you can come to RAFT, our new dementia support program. Could definitely be a support to you and your husband, providing more information about the disease, the specific type of dementia that he might have, and help with any challenges, help you all plan for the future.
I also wanted to say that one way you can start, like Sydney mentioned at the end of our program, is to contact so we can do consultation, because we do individual consultation with folks in the community, or it can be a family member or caregiver to kind of help you get those information together, whether you come to us or if it's something that you need to meet with the neurologist or someone to help you out. But it sounds like they already prescribed medication and you are not utilizing the medication. So there might be some strategy and intervention that we can work with you to get him back to the medication. So maybe you can, contact Sydney. We'll do consultation with you and kind of give you some strategy that you can work with at home with your loved one. Because sometimes they present with behavior. So agitation, sleepiness, all those things, it could be side effect of medication. It could be a, part of the dementia, the behavior that he's exhibiting. So we can work with you in that regard.
I want to get to one question that's been asked a few times. Shannon, for you, I see about peer support. I'd love to know if RAFT is doing this. This is something we're starting. We actually have, we have 2 peer leaders that are being trained to do a peer support group for older adults, and it will be specifically around older adults with mental health issues, whether it is diagnosed or mental health concerns which are undiagnosed. So that is something that we're in the process of going through right now, and I'm interested to see if RAFT has their own.
It will be good.
Well, you can send them
Great
on
idea.
over. This is why we have partners.
Yes.
Right. It's a great idea, but it's not our primary mission, right?
Yes.
And for that, we want to absolutely leave it to NAMI Northern Virginia to provide those support groups. For individuals with family members with dementia, the Alzheimer's Association is a great resource for support groups to talk about, what's going on with their family members and how to feel supported and feel not alone in dealing with this. So NAMI and the Alzheimer's.
I want to bring, there's another question that I think was alluded to a couple of times. RAFT sounds like a great organization. It is. I have family outside of Virginia struggling with dementia and caregiver issues. Do you have references to similar organizations in other states? And this was a few times, so I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so I think depending on where you are, maybe check in with us and we can see, because we know some of the places that are similar to us around the area and the DMV. There's not a lot of programs that are exactly like RAFT. We're a little unique, but we can certainly connect you all to similar resources related to dementia and depression. And I did see a couple questions in the chat about how there are a lot of people who are solo aging in this area or who do live very far from their loved ones living with dementia. And that is a great point. I know we've worked with families in our program where person living with dementia is here, loved ones are further away, so it's more of a virtual visit, but it's definitely a good point to keep in mind for presentations that not everyone has that same family support. So thank you, Carol. I think it was Carol who mentioned that.
And that's where the program come into play to help connect them with support in the community, because they have people who can visit, so all those resources are available. If we know what you need, we can help connect you to those services.
More questions, and I see a couple more coming in. Does depression appear more often in older adults who have had a stroke or experienced other brain injury?
So I looked up that question earlier on to get information about it from NIH. So according to information they have on NIH website, it says post-stroke depression in elderly patients has been considered the most common neuropsychiatric consequences of stroke up to 6 to 24 months after stroke. So when depression appears within days after stroke onset, it is likely to remit, whereas depression at least 3 months is likely to be sustained for 1 year. So this is just from NIH website. So this is not our expertise, but I was referencing that so you can get the accurate information on that.
Shannon, you just made my day. Here's another question. Is it helpful to tell the person they have dementia? If not, what do you say? This is a great question.
It is.
We can use the earlier example that we have recently for a different diagnosis. Every individual is different. Like your situation, yes, you have dementia, another person have dementia. You have to know the person very well, their history. How would they take the news? What kind of dementia did they have? You know, what stage? There's so many factors. Do they need support in place before you can share the news? Will they have someone that will follow up afterwards? So are they able to comprehend, to process what you are telling them? Is it something that you can share with the doctor around or family members around? So there's so many factors involved when you sharing diagnosis. At least I'm sure you can attest to that. We recently have similar situation where we all have to weigh the pros and cons, the consequences. You know, do you share it now? Do you wait? What do you have to have in place before you come? Because it's a big deal to tell someone they have this. So their livelihood, everything, you need to consider so many factors before you share, you know, such a news. So we don't want to say yes because we don't know the situation. We don't want to say no, we don't know the situation, but eventually they're going to have to get the news so they can start the care or treatment they need. So
people also will recognize it in themselves differently, right? For some people, they might know something's going on with me. I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm forgetting things. I'm not doing well at work or whatever my other activities are. And they might recognize that something's going on. For other people, though, they might not recognize it at all. And you bringing that up can be really difficult and challenging for them to hear. So figuring out kind of where they're at is also helpful in how you bring up that conversation. Because for some people, they might be thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And now you've put a name to it. Right now they have something they can look up and learn more about, and that can actually be helpful. And for other people, it might not necessarily be. It might be very scary, and you pointing out this issue that they didn't even realize that they had.
And the other thing to keep in mind too, I think is very important, is that sharing a medical diagnosis with an individual, whether it's a cardiac condition, whether it's anything, should often come from a medical professional, right? And then when that person receives that information, then you can really, build that system of support for that individual with the new diagnosis. What is that person going to need? What is going to be helpful for them? How much checking in do I need to do? Because you want to keep that person safe. And the more, it's time has a big impact. We were working with, a client whose father had Alzheimer's, mother had another type of dementia, and she was young. She was in her early 60s. She recognized that she could not remember things. She had a hard time managing her bank account. And and our dementia staff did a wonderful job supporting her through that process, helping her with the neurology appointment, and really being there for her as she adjusted to her new diagnosis and how life is still possible. She connected to all kinds of resources and really started to turn things around. So the right process is really important.
Because it's, it's important for us in mental health in terms of recovery, that there's hope and that we can continue to offer hope. And I love your approach, and I love how you work, because as someone who's been a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's, it's hard to be in that position, and it's hard to remember that there is hope as you see your loved one change.
Right.
And so I appreciate that. I appreciate how
And holding on to
you
the
keep that.
things that people can do is that, you know, to Sydney's point, is that people still have those feelings. And being able to connect with that, no matter what stage of the dementia it is, and finding the good in every little thing that happens.
We have time for one more question. Shannon, I see your hand up. Can you unmute?
Yes, thank you for giving me 30 seconds. I just want to say I lived for 5 years in assisted living facilities from 2016 to 2021 as I recovered from a disabling suicide attempt in 2015. And I know firsthand, having lived beside people who had early onset Alzheimer's, a woman in her 60s who had early onset Alzheimer's, to a woman in her 90s who never spoke. And what you were doing is so incredibly valuable. And I just want to say that from the heart, because I lived it. And I am fortunate in that I've been living on my own for a couple of years. And I'm a NAMI interim voice speaker and connection recovery facilitator in Silver Spring, Maryland. And if there's anything I can do to help you, I'll email y'all.
Thank you, Shannon, for sharing your story and the courage that you have.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
But you all are doing incredibly very valuable work. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. It
Shannon.
sounds like you are as well.
Yeah.
I want to.
I'll do just what we can do.
Exactly.
Well, I want to mention, I'm going to let Dee Dee talk about an event that we're just thrilled to be a part of. I'm going to put a link up that has the flyer and location, but this is an event coming up May 31st, end of the month in Burke, Virginia. Dee Dee, can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, it's gonna be in Burke. May 31st is Older Adult Month in May. We do this every year. And we also celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month as well. So that event is coming up. We're gonna have great speakers. We ask you guys to join. There will be a lot of resources available for you to get information about mental health, older adults, all the resources that you need is gonna be there. We're also gonna have dementia simulation. So everything you heard tonight, you're gonna go through simulation to see what is it like for someone to live with dementia. So you go through a room and go through simulation, will gown you up so you can be in the room for about 8 minutes to go through the process. You will not regret it. So we encourage you to come out to join us and so many other individuals. And we're also gonna have someone from frontotemporal dementia national organization is going to be there to speak about that. So if you're available, we ask you to join us. It's going to be great with so many other things too. I hope I'm not forgetting. Yeah,
No,
the flyer is, all the information is in the flyer. So please check it out. Call us if you have questions. There's so many other things that we couldn't fit in the flyer. So that's why you need to come in and enjoy the event, May 31st. From 10 to 2.
Yep, the link is on in the chat. We'll send it out with the slides from this, which I'm grateful that Sydney and Dee Dee and Alice will share with us, and we can share with you. In that, I will put contact information in the follow-up email. This is also going to be on our YouTube channel. Give it a couple days, but we'll put it up on our YouTube channel. Please share it. Share it with your network, share it with your friends, share it with your contacts. It's a lot of great information if you can't tell. We want everyone to know about the just wonderful resources that Northern Virginia RAFT has. And as our support groups for older adults, and both people that are dealing with mental health issues and their caregivers, 2 separate, come up, we'll definitely let everybody know. Do we need to register for that? No, there's no registration for the May 31st event. Come and join us. Get the information, bring your friends, bring your loved ones. You know, the more people that, again, going with the same thing that we believe, the more people that we can educate, the better. So bring them all. Tell your friends, tell your churches.
And one thing I wanted to plug in, we get a lot of questions about insurance coverage. Will my loved one be covered for we're gonna have Medicaid and Medicare, Anthem, United Health. So we bring all your questions. I forgot to include that because pay source is always an issue. Will I be able to afford this? So come in so you can get information about all that.
Yeah. So, and with that, I'm going to thank everyone for joining us. Next month's Mental Health Awareness Month, be prepared. Lots of great information coming, and we're going to be sure to share information from Northern Virginia RAFT. So thank you all, Alice, Sydney, Dee Dee. So appreciate it. And for everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you much.
Bye.
Bye.